Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast. Today, a huge greenhouse development is given the go-ahead in Essex. It's going to be powered and heated by an incinerator which takes household waste in the county, and it's hoped it'll help reduce our reliance on imported salad vegetables.
We believe it is very much the future. Primarily, it is a mechanism for us to fix one of our most expenses, namely energy, and the other one being labour. So it makes us immune from geopolitics and spikes in energy and other such things that we're seeing at the moment.
First, though, today, voters go to the polls next Thursday in several elections around Britain. In Wales and Scotland, there are national elections, and in England, some voters will be making choices about the makeup of their councils. Farming policy is, of course, devolved, so Wales, Scotland and Northern Ireland have their own policies. Today, we're looking at Scotland. Over the next 5 years, a 4-tier system will be brought in to replace the old European direct payments. The National Farmers Union in Scotland wants a ring-fence budget and support focused on active farmers growing food. I asked our Scotland Rural Affairs correspondent, Kevin Keane, what the main parties are offering.
The SNP says that it recognises that there needs to be a measured transition to take into account the needs of the environment and the restoration of nature, which is, of course, an important balancing act, it says, in relation to those direct payments. It says that change will happen in consultation with the farming sector, with a commitment to supporting active farming and food production, just as the union wants. Scottish Labour says it wants to build a genuine partnership with farmers to exploit the growth potential of the food and drink sector domestically and internationally. It says it wants to modernise Scotland's agricultural support system with a cap on Tier 1 payments, that's direct payments, for the largest businesses. The Conservatives say that they would boost the £660 million farm support budget by at least £50 million and that it would set multi-year funding settlements. The Greens, though, say that they would replace the bulk of the current farming subsidies and shift payments so that those who produce food in what they call a nature-friendly way receive a greater share of those farm subsidies. The Lib Dems say that they would ring-fence agricultural funding, they'd protect support payments, and they would move to a 3-year funding deal to give the farmers that confidence and the certainty that they crave to make investment decisions. And Reform UK say that they would reform the farm payment system to support active farmers and also to provide farmers with the ability to be able to, in their words, to invest properly.
There are something like 30,000 people living and working on crofts in Scotland. What do they want from politicians, which is slightly different to farmers?
Yeah, well, crofters have been going through a period of change themselves recently politically. That piece of the last piece of legislation that was passed by the Scottish Parliament before going into dissolution was the Crofting and Scottish Land Court Bill, which has tightened some of the rules around crofting. But it's also, as part of the process, promised a wider review of crofting law over the duration of the next Parliament, which could have quite considerable implications. One of the biggest concerns about crofting communities has been the loss, if you like, of active crofts for a whole host of reasons. So some of that is a lack of enforcement to make sure that those people who do have the crofts are actually crofting on them. Another is people buying crofting land, often not realising that it's not just a piece of land for development or for residing in, but also that it comes with commitments and responsibilities. And so the next Parliament will see a review of all of that should really ask a kind of broad question about what is modern crofting. It's been 140 years since that first piece of legislation was introduced to protect tenants from the Highland clearances, and the big question around it is how can it be protected in kind of modern times.
And what are the main parties saying about crofting then?
Yeah, well, the SNP says it's taking measures to discourage people from buying crofts as second homes, like increasing council tax on second homes and introducing the additional dwelling supplement, that's for the tax on house purchases. And it's also promising a rural renewal bill, which would, among other things, revitalise support and opportunities for crofting for new entrants, it says. Scottish Labour says that payment cap I mentioned earlier for larger businesses would provide additional financial support for the likes of crofters, but it also says it would review crofting legislation to keep crofting accessible for that next generation. The Conservatives say that they would encourage both crofting and tourism side by side, maintaining crofters' livelihoods, but also encouraging growth and innovation to bring tourists into some of those parts of the countries where at the moment there is none or very little. The Greens say that they recognise that there are issues to be addressed in the next Parliament around land changing hands, for example, as we've mentioned, but it says that Parliament needs to make sure that families can stay on crofts and support their own lives and also have a kind of good standard of living while doing it. The Lib Dems, they say that they'd launch a review on crofting within the first year of the Parliament, so looking at how it can grow and also how to help prevent depopulation in those communities. And Reform's manifesto doesn't mention crofting specifically at all, but the leadership there says that crofters need to be backed, and in the next Parliament they'll be looking for cross-party consensus to help some of those communities to thrive.
Kevin Keane, and there's plenty more information about the Scottish elections on the BBC Scotland website. Tomorrow we'll be covering the elections in Wales, and we'll be looking at England on Friday. All this week we're looking at agroforestry, the practice of using trees in farming, from trees in wheat fields to woodland combined with grazing. Today it's horticulture, so salad, fruit and veg. At Abbey Home Farm near Cirencester in Gloucestershire, they incorporate trees into everything they do, even down to planting them in the salad greenhouse to shade the produce. Sally Challoner went to the farm to meet head grower Andy Dibben.
I've been working here for 10 years, and about a couple of years into arriving, we discussed integrating trees or agroforestry into our growing areas. We started in the field we're in at the moment, which is essentially a field-scale vegetable operation. We enjoyed and have seen the benefits of integrating trees into our production systems, that we've started using them in other areas as well. So we have them in our mechanised field scale, we have them in protected cropping, and we also have them in our intensive market garden, and they work as a completely different tool that do different jobs in all three of those areas.
So this one we're in at the moment, you say this is the first one?
Yes.
Massive field and some dug up areas, some covered with fleece, but trees alongside every single growing area. Tell me about this.
When we integrate trees into our cropping areas, it's not just because we love trees, it's for a purpose. So like I said, we use them as a tool. So in this field, I mean, if you look at the far end of the field, we have wind turbines down there. So that is an indicator that this field can get pretty windy. We are a very windy, dry spring at the moment. Water is becoming scarcer. If we can drop wind speeds, we can reduce our water usage, because it reduces evaporation from the soil, but also transpiration from the crop leaves. So that's really, really important. We are also a shop that tries to grow as many different UK crops as possible. So we used to buy in a lot of apples. So in this field, we have 99 apple trees, 13 different varieties, and they will basically long term, when they reach maturity, will be self-sufficient in apples in the farm shop from mid-August, hopefully through to about mid to the end of February.
And they're beautifully in blossom at the moment. It's lovely. What are the crops that you're growing then in between the trees?
So this actually, just behind me, this is an area that was celeriac. That's actually finished cropping now, but we grow in this field. So in this system we have overwintered garlic here, sat right in between the apple trees here. We grow new potatoes in this field. We grow beetroot, we grow carrots, we grow a whole range of brassicas, so Brussels sprouts, cabbages, cauliflowers.
Now, we talked about climate resilience, and on my way in, I noticed glass houses with trees inside. Can we go and have a look?
Yeah, we definitely can. Yeah, a completely different objective. So we use this very much for deep midwinter, very short day length production, get much faster growth. And now we're going into, and you can just notice how much hotter it is when we come in here, and no wind at all. So we grow trees in here for a completely different reason. And we'll wander down the bottom and I'll show you.
Yeah.
So basically, what we have in here, what we're looking at, is fan-trained nectarines.
Kind of like a wall of tree, aren't they?
Yeah.
So like a hedge, really.
Pretty much. We fan-train them so they're kind of north-south. So as the sun goes across the sky, the crops on either side of the trees get a really decent amount of sunlight. But the predictions are that our summers are going to get hotter and hotter and hotter. So we can easily get up towards 40 degrees in here. So shade becomes really, really important. I mean, who would have thought we'd have said that in England like 20 years ago? If you take a tomato crop, tomato pollen denatures, so it doesn't work, at 28 degrees centigrade. So as soon as our temperatures go above that, we're getting an impact on our yield of tomatoes. So we get shade for our crops in the summer. Nectarines, we get late frosts here. We could never grow nectarines outside because we'd lose the blossom too often. And the thing that wherever we have the trees, we're organic, we don't use pesticides, so we need to enhance predatory insect populations to do that job for us. Trees are the most amazing habitat for all life.
Obviously outside in the field you don't need to worry about where the roots are growing, but here it's right next to the crops. Do you have to worry about the trees taking the nutrients, taking up space?
That is such an important question, and like all of these things, there's not a lot of research to base this stuff on. There's a big learning curve, and you've just hit the nail on the head about the biggest lesson we've learned. So we actually have to prune the roots, basically. So we actually use a very sharp spade, or we put in physical barriers, and that means that almost like the fan-trained tree, the roots grow in a linear way underground. But it's something we've learnt about and we have to actively manage. And it's the same out in the fields. But we'll have to use a deep blade on the back of a tractor to keep those roots away from the cropping areas. You have to foresee and manage the positive interactions between trees and crops and the negative interaction between trees and crops.
Andy Dibben there in Gloucestershire. Well, a much bigger greenhouse than the one Sally has just seen has been given the go-ahead in Essex. Just slightly smaller than the UK's largest one in Kent, it'll cover 40 hectares of recovered waste ground. Rivenhall Greenhouse near Witham will get its heat and energy from a waste incinerator on the same site run by Indiva, which will burn all of the black bag waste from Essex. The greenhouse will grow 28,000 tonnes of tomatoes a year, and the developers say this will offset 7% of UK tomato imports from southern Spain, Morocco and Holland. Ed Morehouse is project director.
We believe it is very much the future. Primarily, it is a mechanism for us to fix one of our most expenses, namely energy, and the other one being labour. So it makes us immune from geopolitics and spikes in energy and other such things that we're seeing at the moment.
I was going to say, at the moment, this is crucial, isn't it? We've been reporting since February about the added cost of the effect of conflict in the Middle East on all forms of food production. So how secure do you think your system is going to be?
I think very is the simple answer to that. And all of Essex's residential black bag garbage is going through the Indiva site. So that is operational for about 94% of the year. And it means that there is always a feedstock coming in because people throw stuff out. And therefore, by default, we will always have a source of heat, carbon dioxide and electricity. So the waste facility is there for over 50 years, as we are. So we see that very much as a sort of a really efficient way. And we've calculated about 70% less carbon intensive of producing food, at a fixed energy price for the long term.
You said there was a World War II hangar, which you're changing to vertical farming, which we know is usually things like strawberries grown under LED lights. How easy is it to convert a building like that?
The site next to the facility is an old airfield that's now been quarried. So it's the last remaining hangar. We inherited it as part of the land deal. And it made an obvious example of going, well, if we put a vertical in, it means I can either do leafy salads or herbs for a supermarket and have that as a similar offering to the vine crops. Or I think another very interesting angle that we're looking at is actually having it as a propagation hub, because it allows us to not bring in propagated material from the Netherlands, but to do it on site in a much more biosecure environment, particularly for tomatoes and strawberries.
Ed Morehouse from Rivenhall Greenhouse. That's all from us today. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Sally Challoner. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.